Here's a fact that should shock every investor watching global markets. While President Donald Trump demands total and permanent access to Greenland, threatening military force and trade warfare on NATO allies, the actual winners in this geopolitical showdown are not the United States, not Denmark, not even Greenland itself, but rather a handful of mining companies, private equity firms, and Chinese state enterprises who have positioned themselves to profit regardless of who ultimately controls the Arctic's untapped mineral wealth. When Trump announced his framework deal on Greenland at the World Economic Forum in Davos, declaring that the arrangement would include mineral rights and would last forever, markets reacted with shock and confusion. Not because the rhetoric was unexpected, Trump has been publicly demanding Greenland since 2019, but because the deal represented something far more sophisticated than the blunt talking points suggested. A calculated repositioning of global mineral supply chains away from Chinese control and toward Western jurisdictions. A strategic pivot worth potentially trillions of dollars, and a wealth transfer mechanism that will benefit private mining companies far more than any government or the Greenlandic people themselves. To understand who actually profits from Greenland's mineral wealth, one must first grasp the staggering value of what lies beneath the ice. Greenland is estimated to hold 36 to 42 million metric tons of rare earth oxides, potentially the world's second largest reserve after China, resources that are absolutely critical for everything from military weapons systems and fighter jets to electric vehicles, renewable energy infrastructure, semiconductors, and the AI data centers upon which the entire digital economy depends. Greenland ranks 8th globally for rare earth reserves with 1.5 million tons of mineable rare earth resources. And more strikingly, the island is home to 2 rare earth deposits among the largest in the world, Kvanefjeld and Tonbreeze. The total theoretical value of Greenland's mineral resources is astronomical, somewhere between $1 and $4 trillion depending on which valuation methodology you apply. But here's where the story becomes critical. Only about $186 billion is considered realistically extractable under current market regulatory and technological conditions. And getting to that extraction requires decades of investment infrastructure development and political stability that Greenland and Denmark currently do not provide. This gap between theoretical value and realizable value is where the actual winners emerge, because the companies and investors who successfully navigate the political chaos, environmental regulations, logistical nightmares, and Greenlandic public opposition stand to capture extraordinary returns, assuming they execute properly and global supply chains actually shift away from Chinese dominance. The first major beneficiary is Critical Metals Corporation, a New York-based mining development company that is developing the Tonbreeze rare earth project in southern Greenland. Critical Metals has seen its stock spike 150% since the beginning of 2026, reaching a market capitalization of over $2 billion. CEO Tony Sage has indicated that within 3 years, Tonbreeze could reduce China's heavy rare earth supply control from 97% to about 50%, a claim that has electrified the rare earth investment community and sent Critical Metals stocks soaring. The Tonbreeze project itself is described as theoretically offering easier access than underground mines because it utilizes open-pit mining and contains deposits of rarer critical minerals that China cannot easily dump on the market at low prices to destroy competition, with goals to mine nearly 1 million metric tons of ore per year, maintaining that pace for more than a century. The political chaos around Greenland has been a gift to Critical Metals valuation and investor enthusiasm. Every time Trump escalates his rhetoric, the stock receives fresh momentum as investors bet that a favorable framework deal could unlock billion-dollar valuations once production actually begins. But here's the critical reality that few investors understand. Tonbreeze remains entirely theoretical. No rare earth mining has occurred in Greenland to date, and the company faces staggering obstacles that make production anything but assured. The second major beneficiary is the broader mining and infrastructure company universe that will service Greenland development, assuming it occurs. Greenland has only 93 miles of road across an island 3 times the size of Texas, just 16 ports with extremely limited capacity, and inconsistent electricity generation. Building the infrastructure required to support industrial rare earth mining in the Arctic will require tens of billions of dollars in capital expenditure, infrastructure that companies specializing in Arctic development, remote mining operations, deep-sea port construction, and cold climate logistics will capture. Construction firms, engineering companies, and equipment manufacturers suddenly find themselves with a potential massive customer in Greenland development, creating a secondary beneficiary class that could profit handsomely even if rare earth extraction itself proves economically marginal. The third and most important beneficiary though perhaps not in the way Trump imagines, is China's state-sponsored mining enterprise ecosystem. Here's where the story becomes truly perverse. Chinese rare earth company Shenghe Resources is the largest shareholder in the Kvanefjeld mine, with 12.5% ownership. And Greenland has explicitly warned that if Western investors do not provide sufficient capital and partnership, the island will be forced to accept Chinese investors and Chinese processing relationships. China dominates the entire rare earth value chain, not just extraction, but more critically, processing and separation, meaning that even if Western companies extract rare earth ore from Greenland, that ore may ultimately travel to Chinese processing facilities for refinement into usable materials. The Trump administration and Western policymakers have repeatedly lobbied mining companies to prevent Chinese acquisition of deposits. But Greenland's Minister of Business and Mineral Resources recently warned that without Western investment, Greenland will have to turn to other partners, including China. This creates a counterintuitive dynamic. The more Trump threatens Greenland and Denmark, the more likely Greenlanders become to turn toward Chinese partners who actually treat them as equals, rather than territories to be conquered. China's long-term strategy in Greenland, patient capital investment, diplomatic respect, and processing agreements, may ultimately deliver far more value than Trump's aggressive posture, which is driving local populations further away from U.S. engagement. The fourth beneficiary is Denmark and its strategic position as gatekeeper. Despite all the rhetoric about taking Greenland or forcing a sale, Denmark retains complete legal and diplomatic control over Greenland's status. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen has explicitly stated, "Our country is not something that can be annexed or taken over simply because someone feels like it," and polling data shows overwhelming local opposition to U.S. acquisition. But here's what makes Denmark the real strategic winner. Every dollar that gets invested in Greenland as development, whether through U.S. capital, EU capital, or Chinese capital, flows through Denmark's regulatory framework and taxation system. Denmark collects taxes on profits, maintains environmental oversight, and retains political leverage. Additionally, the Trump administration is considering direct payments between $10,000 and $100,000 per Greenland resident as a way to nudge public sentiment toward U.S. realignment. Yet polling shows such overtures are politically tone-deaf, with 85% of Greenlanders opposing leaving Denmark to join the United States, while just 6% support the idea. Denmark's refusal to even negotiate seriously with Trump positions it as the defender of Western democratic values against authoritarian overreach, actually strengthening Denmark's position within the EU and NATO rather than weakening it. The fifth beneficiary is the hedge fund and private equity ecosystem that can invest in mining companies, infrastructure plays, and downstream rare earth processing businesses without directly engaging in the geopolitical chaos. Firms that back companies like Critical Metals, invest in rare earth processing technology, or develop Arctic logistics infrastructure can capture tremendous upside while avoiding direct political entanglement. For sophisticated capital allocators, Greenland development represents one of the most interesting speculative opportunities of the coming decade. Asymmetric risk-reward profiles where the capital can appreciate dramatically if any mining actually occurs, but where losses are contained because the companies involved typically have other operations and revenue streams. Now let's address the brutal reality that most commentators ignore. Trump's entire Greenland strategy will likely fail to deliver the outcomes he envisions. And when it fails, the miners will be blamed rather than the flawed geopolitical assumptions. According to Anthony Marchese, chairman of Texas Mineral Resources Corporation, who testified before Congress, if you're going to go to Greenland for minerals, you're talking billions upon billions in costs spread across decades, and this assumes Greenland's people, Denmark, Europe, and the foundations of the Western Alliance survive the attempt intact. Mining experts describe the idea of turning Greenland into America's rare earth factory as completely bonkers, with one Arctic expert stating, "You might as well mine on the moon. In some respects, it's worse than the moon, because mineral extraction in the Arctic can be 5 to 10 times more expensive than doing it elsewhere on the planet, and Greenland lacks the infrastructure and manpower required to make mining a reality." The Trump administration claims this is not primarily an economic issue, but rather one of national security. Yet this argument collapses under scrutiny because the pipeline for rare earth supplies is full after the U.S. made significant progress in standing up its supply chain over the past year, meaning Greenland supplies are not needed in the near term. If supplies truly are not needed, then the entire justification becomes geopolitical theater rather than strategic necessity. The investors and companies who will actually profit from Greenland are those positioned to benefit from the political chaos and media attention, regardless of whether mining actually occurs. Critical metals stock benefits from every Trump tweet about Greenland. Infrastructure companies benefit from discussions of development. Processing companies benefit from uncertainty around supply chains. And Chinese companies benefit most of all because Western obsession with keeping China out of Greenland may ultimately fail and force Westerners into Chinese processing partnerships anyway. For individual investors watching this drama unfold, the key insight is stark. Greenland is not about solving Western mineral supply problems. Those are already being solved through domestic production increases and supply chain diversification. Greenland is about geopolitical signaling, domestic political theater, and creating investment opportunities for those sophisticated enough to profit from the gap between rhetoric and reality. The real question every investor must answer is this: do you want to invest in companies betting that Trump's aggressive posture will somehow overcome the fundamental economic, infrastructural, environmental, and political obstacles to Arctic mining, or would you prefer to invest in companies positioned to profit from whatever actually emerges from this chaos, including potentially benefiting from Chinese partnerships, if Western capital proves insufficient? The answer to that question will determine whether you capture the extraordinary returns this Arctic mineral story will eventually deliver or become a casualty of geopolitical miscalculation. Subscribe now because over the next 48 to 72 hours, Trump will make fresh announcements regarding Greenland mineral negotiations, and those announcements will create trading opportunities for investors who understand that the Arctic's untapped wealth will enrich Wall Street and mining executives far more than it will benefit Greenland, Denmark, or the average American consumer. If you want to understand which companies are positioned to profit and which are overvalued based on mere rhetoric rather than realistic development timelines, the strategic breakdown I've provided here is your foundation. What questions do you have about the Greenland mineral story, and which mining company exposure makes most sense for your portfolio given the geopolitical dynamics at play? Share your thoughts in the comments below.